What's up, and welcome back. I'm John Stark, MacMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic, and today I am using my platform to review Change, Not Charity. This is a documentary short. It did actually play some festivals and then it ended up on PBS, and that's where I got it. I watched it through the PBS app where I got audio description. Look at that. So you too can get PBS audio description. They branded it under American Experience, but it's a standalone documentary that had a run on its own. Like, it did not premiere exclusively as American Experience. It's like a separate thing, and they just, I guess that's just, I don't know how PBS works, but they just slapped American. So if you're looking for it, look for it under American Experience. It's narrated by Peter Dinklage. I don't know who did the audio description for it though. Um, I think I think they revealed themselves, but they didn't say a company. There was a part in the movie where it talked about where there were some credits. Anyway, it really goes into everything having to do with the fight for civil rights for disabled individuals. It starts at a point and then it has to go back from that and then forward, because it's primarily about the Americans with Disabilities Act, but it does go back in time to the Nixon administration when we touched up the Rehabilitation Act and we added Section 504, which was the Rehabilitation Act had a lot of stuff that was aimed at improving lives for veterans, and it included a clause that said that no institution that uh, received federal funding could discriminate against disabled individuals, individuals based on disability, or however you want to phrase that. I didn't memorize how it's phrased. Uh, so that's a big thing that's currently being targeted by states for its constitutionality. They believe they constitutionally have the right to discriminate against us, and in a couple of my videos, I've mentioned, to try to draw attention to it, this problem that we have with states that are trying to sue to get that right. In general, a lot of things. There are a lot of things that are not happening that are happening right now that are not great for disabled community. A lot of stuff having to do with education, special education, kids being sort of lumped together. They're losing a lot of their aids, and they're kind of being lumped together in one classroom, being pulled out of normal classes when all they would have needed was reasonable accommodations. They're kind of being put together in one class, if at all. Um, so it seems as though people just don't want to have to deal with it anymore. And uh, this documentary sort of highlights the fight, everything that it took to get to a point where people like me were recognized as human, as citizens, and the fight that actually had to occur to get to this point. Because even though Section 504 passed as part of the Rehabilitation Act during Nixon's administration, they did nothing to implement it. Nixon, it was just like this law that was passed that nobody enforced. Nixon didn't enforce it, Ford didn't enforce it, and then finally, by the time they got to the Carter administration, disabled people were so frustrated with the fact that they finally had a law in the books that said, because buildings were completely inaccessible. I mean, wheelchair ramps didn't exist. These were not things, wheelchair accessible elevators and stuff that we weren't, people didn't want to do it because it was expensive. And it was easier to just tell disabled people that they didn't, they had no right to be there, or they didn't need to exist, or and the audacity of arresting a whole bunch of disabled individuals for protesting. So you get to see all of that. We talk about the occupation of a federal building in San Francisco during one of the protests that became the largest nonviolent occupation of a federal building in U.S. history. up to this point where a bunch of disabled individuals sort of took over the fourth floor of a building and stayed there and ended up staying there for a long time. And they got support from a whole bunch of other um, groups, including Black Panthers, which brought them food and medicine. And they tried negotiating with Congress, and Congress wouldn't listen to them. So the protests went on, and they wanted 504 to be recognized, for someone to actually do something with it, instead of just pass legislation that not do anything with it. Which led to eventually they did get the recognition, and 504 would finally be enforced for at least buildings that institutions that receive federal funding. You know, if you're gonna get funding from the government, then you should be accessible to everybody. So that makes sense. But then they needed the Americans with Disabilities Act, because even with that, they were targeting 504 and trying to get exemptions. They were trying to be like, well, because everybody's like, well, it's expensive. Do we really have to do this? Are the disabled people really worth this? And as this documentary pointed out, there are an estimated 40 million people in the country that were of some level of disabled, and that's a lot of people to just say screw it. And it's one of the reasons why, by the time we get to Bush Sr. and his campaign and his administration, he finally embraces the Americans with Disabilities Act, because he sees that as a voting bloc. He sees 40 million Americans as being a huge chunk of people that will vote for him if he just stands up and says, yeah, we're going to get this passed. So after long efforts in fighting for rights and equality for decades, the Americans with Disabilities Act finally passes under the Bush administration. And after that, we live in a place now where we do have wheelchair ramps, and we do have accessible elevators, and we do have bathroom stalls, wheelchair accessible bathroom stalls. We do have Braille, so that I could know if I'm walking into the men's or the women's bathroom, because I have a feeling if I walked into the wrong one, somebody would have a problem with that. So, yeah, I mean, there are those things. So, it's an important documentary, and it's an important documentary because for some reason, nowadays we have people who are trying to take away our rights. And every time somebody stands up and says DEI is bad, what they don't realize is that a lot of those DEI initiatives go to help people like me. There are still a huge chunk of the disabled community that are unemployed, that are seeking employment and face hurdles in getting that employment. There are still places that can underpay disabled individuals. They don't have to pay them minimum wage because they get some sort of like weird ass government grant slash waiver just for being able to just for giving some poor disabled person some menial task and of I don't know, putting 10 pencils together and then shipping those 10 pencils off. So some businesses are finding ways of getting sort of really cheap labor to do fairly simple tasks, and then paying them like $2 an hour to do it. That's a real thing. So those of us who simply just need accommodation or devices or something like that are not offered the opportunity to get the accessibility that we need. Still, today, despite ADA, we're trying to still fight these battles, and these battles are now being fought against us because inclusivity has become a bad word. So I appreciate this documentary for its existence. Change, not charity. So it also does talk about how Jerry Lewis's telethon used to just always sell people on the fact that they should care because they should feel pity for us, and that it always presented everybody as being like the saddest person on the face of the planet, and what it was like for a lot of disabled people whose disability even resembled muscular dystrophy around the time of Jerry Lewis's telethon, and how they used to be harassed for uh, because they were like, well, it's that time for muscular dystrophy. Made me think a lot about how we now have uh, we have these awareness things for like autism. I can't think of the name of it, but I know Jon Stewart's been promoting it. I know there's Stand Up to Cancer, but I can't think of what the autism one is called. Is it Night of a Thousand Laughs or something like that? I don't know. There's something like that that's an autism awareness one. So we're still kind of doing it, but I think we're probably doing it in a better way where we're not like bringing somebody out and being like, look at this child. Isn't it sad? Don't you feel bad for this child? Donate now. Donate now to this child. Uh, yeah, I mean, I get that. At the same time, I do want you to be aware of like what the problems are, why you should care about it, and how you can support us. Like those, I think those are important things. And when I tackle like disability in film and documentaries, I always think about that. I think about it, like I don't think Blink did that as a documentary. So I think about, does it tell you what the disability is, like a realistic interpretation of it? Does it tell you why you should care? And does it tell you what you could do to help change, make it better, to improve the situation? Like if you want to go out and do something, what is it that you could do that is actually substantive and meaningful? And in this case, if you watch this film and you're like, well, what can I do to help the disabled community? The answer is, if you live in one of the 17 states that's challenging Section 504, call your state attorney and get them to pull out of the lawsuit. Demand that they pull out of the lawsuit. So, and also stop attacking DEI initiatives. They're also not all about hiring. They're also targeting, figuring out ways of how they can attract certain demographics that would not normally shop or eat or whatever at their restaurant. So, you know what I'm saying? Like a DEI initiative at Chili's doesn't necessarily mean all of your waiters are going to be in wheelchairs, but what it might mean is that they figured out a way to have accessible menus and accessible seating. You know, like they might actually find a way to make their place more welcoming for disabled individuals that come in. Sometimes I have a really hard time in restaurants. I think I'm like going to walk into everybody. I'm like, I'm going to walk we'll walk right into somebody's meal. I get so nervous sometimes in restaurants trying to, because they don't, sometimes you're just like free roaming through tables and they're not. I love restaurants when the rows are like straight, but you don't always get that. You get these rows and they curve and you're like, where am I going? I'm just like, I feel like I'm gonna bump into somebody. So yeah, I hate those restaurants the most. So yeah, I mean, those are things that you could take into consideration as an example. So that has nothing to do with a hiring practice at all. For some reason, they think all of that has to do with hiring. It doesn't all have to do with hiring. Sometimes it has to do with what kind of clientele do you want to have. So, of course, I'm going to give this documentary an A. Like, I mean, what the fuck do you think I'm going to do? I mean, it's catered to me. I feel like it did everything it needed to do, and it did it in under an hour. So it makes it really accessible for people to be able to watch this and If they know nothing, now they'll know more. So Peter Dinklage does a nice job of narrating. I really have nothing against this documentary. It goes over the history. It talks about some of the major players in the movement, and it does it all succinctly. So yeah, it gets an A. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and I'll see you guys on the other side.